On this Friday night, Canada's vaccination drive slows down. As fewer people roll up their sleeves, could that lead to another surge?
We don't know if you're one of the people who will get really sick or just a little bit sick. That's why it's still important to get vaccinated.
The path to protecting interpreters who helped Canadian troops in Afghanistan.
The risk of retribution from the Taliban is grave.
What Ottawa is promising. Explosive and unpredictable. Strong winds fuel BC's already intense wildfire fight.
It was quite scary. We just have no idea, of course, how long it's going to be.
Plus, how choking smoke is fast becoming a summer health hazard.
Like a chimney, it can just build up over time.
The Olympics opening ceremony kicks off in a cloud of controversy.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Farah Nasser.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us as we head into a weekend enjoying more freedoms thanks to a hugely successful vaccination campaign. There are worries that it may not last as the number of doses given out each day begins to plateau. More than 80% of eligible Canadians have now at least had one dose, but that number may not get much higher. About 18% of Canadians say they aren't willing to get vaccinated, and that translates to nearly 7 million people here unprotected. Now, several countries that have already seen vaccination rates plateau are now experiencing another surge in cases. So the question is, could Canada be next? Eric Sorensen has our top story tonight.
Canadians are getting out and the economy is recovering. The number of COVID cases, hospitalizations and deaths are all way down. A major factor, Canada has one of the most successful vaccination programs in the world. But the numbers are plateauing. In the UK and the US, among the first to vaccinate widely, doses have stalled. Canada had a higher vaccine distribution, but is also now slowing down. Why it's important? American and British COVID numbers are rising again. And while Canada still has a very low number of cases, about 400 per day, will it last?
This is part of the trend that is concerning, especially as we look towards the fall with the hope of reopening schools especially and making sure that people are protected.
The Delta variant is so highly contagious, the unvaccinated are at much higher risk of getting sick. Alberta's medical officer of health tweeted this week, 91% of COVID deaths and 95% of hospital and ICU admissions were in those who did not have two doses.
We will have to get that double vaccination number up. Otherwise, we will still see people getting sick.
But the vaccine uptake is uneven across the country. Big urban centers with high COVID case numbers are getting a big turnout. In Alberta, there are areas in both Calgary and Edmonton where at least 60% of residents or more are fully vaccinated. But in several rural locations in the province, just 30% or fewer have been fully vaccinated. There's also a disparity among age groups. In Ontario, for example, little hesitancy among seniors. Over 75% have had two doses. But among young people, aged 12 to 29, fewer than 50% are fully vaccinated. There are incentives, such as this recent pop-up clinic in Toronto, to make it easy for young people to get their shots. Other jurisdictions are looking at incentives from prizes to lottery tickets to reach those who are delayed or hesitant.
We want people to be incentivized to get the vaccine. It's clear and unequivocal that we'll all benefit the higher the rates of vaccination are in the country.
Canada has a high vaccination rate, but there's no guarantee that it's high enough to avoid another upsurge in COVID. The message from doctors: get both doses, and the sooner the better. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
And there are signs Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine could soon be used more widely. The European Union's drug regulator is recommending the shot be approved for kids aged 12 to 17. A study of more than 3,700 children in that age group showed children produced an antibody response comparable to that in adults. Currently, Pfizer is the only shot approved for 12 to 17-year-olds in this country. Moderna submitted its application for approval to Health Canada in June. More than 10,000 food workers in Britain are getting exemptions from quarantine rules. Self-isolation requirements have led to staff shortages and empty shelves across England. In what's being dubbed a pingdemic, phones have been inundated by alerts after a surge in COVID-19 cases. Anyone pinged by the app is supposed to self-isolate for 10 days. Last week, more than 500,000 alerts were sent out. Australia's most populous state has declared a national emergency as it struggles to contain a surge in cases of the Delta variant. New South Wales is reporting the largest number of daily new infections since the pandemic began. New Zealand has now suspended its quarantine-free travel bubble with Australia for 2 months. After weeks of intense pressure from Canadian veterans, the federal government confirms it has teams on the ground in Afghanistan working to bring interpreters and support staff to Canada. With the U.S. pulling its troops out of the country, there has been a growing urgency to get Afghans who worked with Canadian forces to safety. Mike Armstrong reports.
Canada is here to support those who supported us.
It is, according to the federal immigration minister, more than simply a debt of gratitude. With the security situation in Afghanistan deteriorating by the day, Canada, he says, has to do something.
We have a moral obligation to do right by them.
Now, those are the words Canadian veterans have been using for weeks, pushing Ottawa to rescue Afghans who worked with Canada. Well, Ottawa is acting. Most of the details are being withheld for safety reasons, but the plan is for arrivals to start in the coming days and for a fairly wide eligibility. Not just interpreters, but other locally hired staff as well, and their families.
Without getting into precise numbers, we do anticipate that the numbers will be in the several thousands.
Global spoke to one of the interpreters in Afghanistan. We're protecting his identity. He's in hiding, waiting to be moved out. But he says he watched the minister's press conference live online.
Feeling super happy that I'm going to my country, to Canada. I'm super happy in my family, my little daughter and my younger brother.
I have to be honest, I'm very emotional right now.
Dave Morrow is one of the Canadian veterans who's been working on the campaign to pressure the government. He says confirmation work is underway, has given him for the first time real optimism, but the clock is ticking.
This is the golden hour where we have to ensure that their safety is protected and that they stay safe and that we can actually get them here before it's too late.
Now, one family watching closely is that of Captain Nicola Goddard. She was killed in a battle with the Taliban 15 years ago this past May. Her family hopes her interpreter is now able to come to Canada and questions whether anything would be happening if veterans hadn't put pressure on the government.
I don't think so. I think the veterans who have stepped forward and have been pushing this for the last few months and also for the last couple of years are really the linchpin.
Some veterans are now turning to a next phase. They're collecting donations and looking for volunteers to help Afghans with their resettlement here in Canada. The job of giving back, they say, is still far from over. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
Now to BC, where officials are keeping a close eye on the fire situation and the role the hot, dry weather may play in making matters worse. Conditions are extremely dry in the southern half of the province. Here is a look at images captured last night of the Inca-Meep Creek wildfire. It's burning near Otoole in BC's wine country. The fire has now tripled in size. As of tonight, there are 270 wildfires actively burning across BC. 85 of them are out of control. More than 5,000 properties are under evacuation order. More than 100 firefighters from Quebec are arriving in the province today to help battle the fires, and another 100 from Mexico are expected this weekend. Global's Lauren Pullen is in Otoole in southern BC for us tonight, tracking the Inca-Meep fire. Lauren, what is the latest on the situation there?
Farah, unfortunately, the situation has gone from bad to worse. With the smoke clearing from the sky, we did get a better picture of just how massive this wildfire is, and it has exploded in size from 2,000 hectares to 6,800 hectares. And even more people had to pack up and leave their homes last night after the wind unexpectedly shifted. As of 2 p.m. this afternoon, more than 700 property owners have been forced to flee from the Inca-Meep Creek wildfire alone. But the community of Farah really has stepped up. The Penticton Indian Band is opening up its doors to house any evacuees who do need a place to stay, and more resources are also en route to fight the flames as this fire continues to burn out of control.
There is discussions around an evacuation alert on Highway 3. There's no plans currently to have a highway closure. Our operations section chief has identified triggers that would initiate a closure of the highway. There has been some damage to power lines, and we're working with Fortis to get any power that has been lost restored.
Lauren, a lot of people throughout BC's fire zones are understandably on edge tonight. So is there any relief coming in the weather forecast?
Unfortunately, in the next few days, it's only expected to get hotter, which is not the news that those people who have been forced to flee their homes or those who have been told to be ready to leave at a moment's notice want to hear. Everyone, of course, is anxiously waiting to see what does happen next. And livelihoods are on the line, too. I spoke with the owners of the Three Valley Gap Chateau, a popular tourist spot just outside Revelstoke with all sorts of priceless artifacts. They are on evacuation order. We're forced to cancel all reservations as a wildfire is burning on the hillside behind them as well, but they are confident that crews are doing all that they can to keep those flames at bay, and they have hope their family legacy will escape the flames.
We've been here for, we opened in 1960 with 7 motel rooms and 7 seats in the coffee shop, and my mom and dad just kept on building and building. And for it to be gone just still doesn't resonate. I can't see it happening.
And unfortunately for the situation here in Soyuz, those temperatures are expected to hover in the mid-30s for the next week with no rain in sight. Farah?
Lauren Pullen in Soyuz tonight. Thank you, Lauren. And wildfire smoke, it's wreaking havoc on the air quality in several parts of the country. Advisories are in place in many cities like Calgary, where a special air quality statement was issued today, with the city hitting an 8 or high on the air quality health index. Here's a look at the smoke hovering over Lake Louise. And with the country's fire season off to an early start, the summer of smoke, well, it'll likely be long. Heather Yourex-West reports on the health consequences.
It's like one lockup after another.
The air surrounding Ron Jabegi's home outside Calgary is heavy with smoke. It's been this way off and on for nearly a week. It's an irritant for most people, but for his 2 children, it's a much larger concern.
So with cystic fibrosis, one of the issues is basically airway clearance. So they're kind of thick and sticky in there versus lubricated like you and I would be. And so the particles of smoke and stuff will build up.
Alyssa and Dylan are staying inside to be safe. Jabegi says they're coping okay, but he worries about the potential impact of a summer filled with smoke. It's something Dr. Courtney Howard has some experience with. The emergency room physician lives in the Northwest Territories, where in 2014, wildfires blanketed the city of Yellowknife with smoke for more than 2 months.
I ended up flying down to see my dad in North Vancouver, and we opened up the suitcase, and the suitcase just smelled like campfire.
Dr. Howard co-authored a study published earlier this year in the British Medical Journal. The research found that the smoke exposure in Yellowknife that summer led to an increase in clinic visits for asthma, pneumonia, and cough. ER visits for asthma doubled, while pneumonia visits increased by 57%.
People also experience what we would now probably describe as a feeling of ecological grief or eco-anxiety. People would say things like, if it's this bad now, what does this mean for our kids?
Howard says as periods of prolonged wildfire smoke exposure become more common, communities will have to prepare with things like designated clean air centers and support for mental health. Ron Jabegi says his family is taking the summer a day at a time, hoping that clearer days are ahead. Heather Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
Under fire over taxpayer-funded contracts. Coming up, so why did the Conservative leader hammer Trudeau's Liberals for doing the same thing? The federal Conservatives are dealing with heavy criticism after Global News reported the office of leader Erin O'Toole awarded taxpayer-funded contracts to friends and party insiders. And as our chief political correspondent David Akin reports, he's also allowed a top aide to run a side business aimed at helping elect more social conservatives. David.
Well, Farah, earlier this year, we learned that a federal government contract, a taxpayer-funded contract, went to a company run by a close friend of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, a fellow named Tom Pitfield. And when the Conservatives found out about the Pitfield contract, they went on the attack.
Mr. Pitfield is not just the Prime Minister's buddy, he's also married to the former Liberal Party president. It certainly pays to be a Liberal insider in Ottawa these days.
But as Global News has learned, it also looks like it pays to be a conservative insider. In his first 6 months in office, Otoole awarded nearly $240,000 worth of taxpayer-funded contracts to his supporters and conservative insiders.
You can't be giving out the taxpayer money to your own insiders and cronies. So I think Erin is got himself locked into the same kind of, old rum bottle politics on the Rito that people really don't like.
That's not all. Otoole has also allowed a top aide, his Deputy Chief of Staff, Steve Outhouse, to run an outside business that works to help some social conservative candidates get on the ballot in the next election. That business's revenue comes from party donations.
If I were a conservative, I'd be asking questions of my leader as to why he is taking sides in nomination conventions on the side of social conservatives and the extreme right.
The business arrangement is unusual. Otoole's office says the House of Commons was consulted and none of it violates House rules. The bottom line to all this, those conservative attacks on liberal ethics, well, they've now been blunted. And that work that Otoole's top aide is doing, well, that has now renewed tensions within the Conservative Party between the social conservative wing and other conservatives. And all of this on the eve of a likely late summer election. Farah?
David Akin in Ottawa. Thank you, David. Coyote ugly. What's behind a series of attacks in 2 provinces? A recent string of coyote attacks is putting people in Vancouver on edge. 31 have been recorded in the city's iconic Stanley Park this year. 4 coyotes were just euthanized as a result, and now officials are looking to find and put down another coyote that attacked a jogger late Thursday. But as Karen Lieberman reports, Vancouver isn't the only city facing coyote fears.
She's a really brave dog. I just screamed for help, but no one was outside.
As 10-year-old Lily Kwan recalls the coyote attack that left her little Yorkshire Terrier badly injured this week. Something amiss in the background. Mid-interview, a man appearing frightened leaps from his scooter onto a parked car.
Oh, I think he almost hit the car.
Oh, the coyote's there.
Oh my God.
The coyote had returned and remained unfazed by the Global News crew before it sauntered off.
This is what I've been trying to tell the city, that we have aggressive coyotes in the neighborhood. As you can see, it actually chased a grown man.
The Kwan's dog Macy suffered extensive injuries to her body. Her attack was caught on security video. The family certain the Yorkie was trying to protect Lily from the coyote.
Neighbors say there are coyote sightings in this area daily, which concerns them because at the center of the community is this park, which can be filled with children playing. In fact, a father tells us just this week his daughter was swinging when a coyote showed up.
And suddenly somebody shouted from there, there's a coyote there. So I saw it was going around behind, and then I grabbed my wife and my daughter, especially because she was playing alone at that time because we just live here.
The City of Toronto warns people should not be feeding wild animals.
The fact that they are present or even attack or kill a pet doesn't mean that the coyote will be removed or euthanized. It's, as I say, it's a reality that coyotes do exist in the city.
You know, even though I got a big German Shepherd, it's still scary because they're wild. You know, it's at the end you got kids.
Yeah, I just looked out the window and there were some coyotes roaming around.
As for Macy, she's now out of hospital, reunited with her family and recovering at home. Karen Lieberman, Global News, Toronto.
The Olympic Games have finally begun officially. Next, the mixed emotions for Canadians in Tokyo. The Tokyo Summer Olympics officially kicked off with the opening ceremony in a near-empty stadium, of course, because of the pandemic. Despite heavy restrictions, COVID-19 cases are rising in Japan, and among those involved in the Games, including athletes. Crystal Gamansing explains.
A delayed but flashy opening to the Tokyo 2020 Olympics. While athlete participation was limited and seats nearly empty, pride filled the national stadium. Outside, a very different mood. The Prime Minister of Japan again defended the decision to invite the world during the pandemic.
I believe that beating COVID-19 and overcoming the difficulties of COVID-19 to go ahead with the Games and to convene the Games, I think that has a value in itself.
Strict rules are in place for athletes, media, and officials attending the Games. But the virus is still spreading. 19 new cases on Friday alone, including 3 athletes. The Canadian Olympic Committee says Team Canada remains virus-free.
I would like to reassure all of those of you back in Canada who have friends, family, loved ones here in Japan competing or supporting the athletes that the plans we have in place are incredibly robust.
He's worked hard, he's focused, and he deserves it.
Canadian sprinter Aaron Brown's parents are in Toronto, but say being on the track in Tokyo means everything to their son.
We just said, you know what, we're behind you, no matter what happens over there. We're obviously here excited, cheering you on.
It's been a tough and turbulent road to Tokyo. The athletes, however, are grateful.
For me personally, this is my one shot. You know, I'm 34 years old. If softball happens to be in the 2028 Olympics, I will not be strapping on my cleats.
With the cauldron now lit, let the games begin. Crystal Gamansing, Global News, London.
We're all cheering on Team Canada from here. That's it for Global National for this Friday. I'm Farah Nasser. Thank you so much for spending part of your evening with us. Tonight's Your Canada is beautiful Georgian Bay in Ontario. We love seeing your Canada, so please keep sending us your photos to viewers@globalnational.com. Jeff Semple is going to be with you at the Anchor Desk this weekend. Until Monday, take care of yourselves and each other.